Welcome back to The Secret World of Og, Chapter 13, The Forbidden Word. And I'm filming outside on this beautiful day, so you're going to hear birdies and wind chimes in the background. Enjoy! Oh, and a dog barking too. Chapter 13, The Forbidden Word. Above Patsy, the bridge across the river began to give way as the crowd scrambled for the opposite shore. It shook and creaked, and then it broke in two, crashing into the water. There were shouts and screams of panic as several stragglers fell into the river, howling in terror. "Oh dear," said Patsy, who felt that, in some vague way, she was responsible for what had happened. The people in the water clawed their way up onto the opposite shore, and Patsy was relieved to see that all of them seemed to be able to swim. Only at the last moment did she hear a thin little voice crying plaintively and see a small green head bobbing in the water. "Why, it's a little green baby," Patsy said. She stuffed Snavely in her pocket, jumped into the river, and swam across to the infant. The little thing was thrashing about wildly, but Patsy, who was very wiry, had no trouble dragging it to the bank. She held it up by one toe and shook it to try to get the water out, whereupon it commenced crying again. Somewhere in the distance she again heard the shouting of a crowd, but here, on the riverbank, there was no longer any sign of people. Oh, here's Patsy, who saved the baby. Except she shouldn't have shook the baby. Penny was waving frantically at Peter. "Keep talking, Pete," she whispered at him, but Peter had nothing more to say. His lower lip was still trembling. He looked as if he were about to cry. "That's enough," said the sheriff. "Haul away, boys." The men up above dug their feet in, and the rope began to tighten. "Oh, Pam," cried Penny, "they really mean it." There was a scuffling off to one side. "It's the littlest one," somebody said. "He's got away. Grab him, quick." "It's Polly," Pamela said. "He's escaped again." The pollywog was crawling off at a steady speed of 6 miles an hour, but he wasn't fast enough. 2 green men overtook him, and even though he bit one on the ankle, they brought him back. "All right," cried the sheriff again. "Haul on the rope." Peter stared wildly at his 2 sisters. He couldn't speak because the rope was too tight around his throat, and his eyes were staring strangely as his breath was cut off. His feet were just leaving the ground when there came a high-pitched scream, and a green figure broke through the crowd, chattering and shouting and panting heavily. The men with the rope dropped it, and Peter fell forward onto his knees. The new man, who was wearing a small boy's playsuit, ran into the heart of the crowd, waving his arms for silence. As he spoke, 2 more arrived, then several more, running down the street. "Glog!" cried the first man in a voice of doom. "Why," said Penny, "there is another word in their language." Captain Hook, who had been lying on his face all this time, jumped to his feet, and Penny could see that he was several shades paler. The others who had been shot also jumped up. "They're not pretending any more," said Pamela. The people crowded around their chief, looking wildly about them, their eyes wide with terror. Peter pulled the rope off his neck and ran over to join the others. "Something really awful must have happened," Penny said. She ran up to Captain Hook and took him by the arm. To her surprise, she saw that he was trembling violently. "What does glog mean?" "It is the forbidden word," said Captain Hook, his teeth chattering. "It is so terrible that even I cannot speak it." And he began to wring his hands and jump up and down. "Yes," said Penny, quite vexed at all the mystery. "But what does it mean?" It means, said Captain Hook, and he rolled his eyes in a horrible way, that the snake people have attacked us. More green people were arriving, all of them in terror. Penny ran up to the chief and seized him by the shoulder. His mask had toppled off, and his face, which turned out to be rather thin and wizened, seemed almost as pale as hers. "They're attacking from all sides," the chief cried, to no one in particular. "They're coming down from the hills. They've infiltrated right to the public square. It's the end of all of us." And he began to run about in a small circle, shouting, "Doomed! Doomed! Doomed!" at the top of his voice. "Oh, don't be such a silly," said Pamela firmly. "Take hold of yourself. What would Wyatt Earp do?" "You know these guns aren't real," said the grand exalted keeper of the Holy Mushroom Patch, admitting it for the first time. "We've no weapons against the snake people." And he threw himself on the ground, hiding his face in his hands, as if trying to make himself invisible. "Now stop that!" Penny cried, pulling him to his feet. She towered over him, being almost twice his height, and she felt like an angry parent scolding a foolish child. "Surely you're not all going to just lie down and give up," she said. "What else can we do?" the chief asked. "You don't know these glogs." He whispered the terrible word in a small, husky voice. "They're worse than the mad monster." "How on earth would you know?" Penny retorted. "You've never even seen one. You've never known anybody who's seen one. It's probably all in your head, like Jesse James and Peter Pan and the other stories." "They've seen them!" cried the chief, pointing to the groups of panic-stricken people arriving in frightened clusters. "They saw one swimming in the river, attacking the bridge. He tore down the bridge and ate one of the babies. They barely escaped his horrible slavering jaws." "It sounds really awful," Pamela said, her eyes growing as big as saucers. "Well, you can't believe one word these people say, I'll tell you that," Penny said. "They're just like a bunch of little children," she said. "Too bad Patsy isn't here," Peter said. "She loves snakes." Penny stared at him, a light slowly dawning. "Good gravy," she said. "Pam, I bet it's little Snavely." "Her garter snake? Of course." "I bet it is too," said Pamela, nodding her head slowly in agreement and thinking it out carefully. "Now I remember. She had him out when she first scared those greenies up above." She started to giggle. "They think Snavely's a whole army of snake people." "Well," Penny said, "one thing about them, they've got good imaginations." A thought struck her, and she turned back to the shivering chief. "Look," she said, "we're not afraid of monsters. We'll save you from the snake people." "How?" said the chief. "We have a secret weapon," said Penny mysteriously. "Yes, yes," said the chief in distraction. "Now," said Penny firmly, "if we save you from the glog, we want you to make us a promise." "Anything," cried the chief, "if you save us." A whisper went through the crowd, and the shouting and whimpering which had been going on subsided a little. "We want safe conduct home again, and a promise from you that you won't use the tunnel under the playhouse any more." "It's a promise," said the chief. "Cross my heart and hope to die," he added, hastily making the gesture. At this, all the Oggs crossed their hearts solemnly. "Oh, yes," said Penny, "and I almost forgot. I want Elizabeth Ann back. She's my doll." "Anything," cried the chief. "Anything at all." "And my cars," cried Peter. "Anything," whimpered the chief, "but please hurry. The snake people have us surrounded." "All right," said Penny. "All you people stay here. We'll drive the snakes back down the river." "Come on," she said to Pamela and Peter. "Bring Polly." "Now don't worry," she said kindly, patting the little green man on the head. "You're going to be all right." The 4 children set out down the main street. "I have a feeling we'll find Patsy by the river," Penny said. "She's probably fallen in, as she always does." "Look, Penny," said Pamela suddenly. "There's Elizabeth Ann." Penny plucked her doll from the unattended stall and hugged her to her bosom. "Oh, Elizabeth Ann," she said, "how glad I am to find you. Were you lonely for your mummy? Did they feed you properly down here? Never mind, darling. As soon as we get home, we'll all sit down and have some tea together." Pamela looked with her big, thoughtful eyes at Penny, hugging the doll to her breast. "I guess everybody has to pretend at least part of the time," she thought to herself. Peter had already run ahead and retrieved the cars that he had sold earlier that afternoon to the stall keeper. He stuffed all of them into his pockets, except his favorite tractor. "Brrr," he said to himself, running the tractor along the edge of the stall. "I'm in my tractor, working on my farm." "Come on, Pete," said Penny cheerfully. "We've got to find Patsy." "And Snavely, too," Pamela reminded her. They ran down to the edge of the river, Penny in the lead, and sure enough, there were Patsy and Yukon King, and Earless Ozdick, and a small green baby, all playing on the bank. The baby was cooing and giggling at something it held in its tiny hand. That something was Snavely. "Hi, Penny," said Patsy. She looked just a little guilty, and she felt that she had probably done something bad. But Penny and the others seemed overjoyed to see her. "He's lost his mummy," Patsy said, pointing at the baby. "Isn't he cute? Earless Ozdick thinks he's another dog." The pollywog dropped out of Penny's clutches and crawled over to the baby. "Og," he said, making conversation. The green baby poked a finger at Pollywog and waved Snavely at him. "Og," said the baby in reply. "Penny," said Pamela, "let's go. We could be up those steps and back home before they knew we still weren't here fighting the snake people." "Yes," said Peter, "let's go. It's almost supper time. I'm hungry." "No," said Penny firmly. "We can't go. We made a promise, and we've got to keep our part of the bargain." "Besides," said Patsy, "we've got to find the baby's mummy." "Come on," said Penny. "We're going back. Patsy, bring the baby and Snavely. I'll hold Polly." "But what if they start that lynching talk all over again?" Pamela said. "We'll just have to take that chance," Penny told her. "But I don't really think they will." "If they do, I'll just scare 'em," said Patsy fiercely. "They're scared of me, you know, Penny." "You just think they are," said Penny. "It's Snavely they're really scared of. They think he's something that he isn't." "Well," said Pamela slowly, "that's nothing new for these people. Or us either, I guess." She thought about that for a moment as they headed back toward the crowd at the cave. "Maybe it's not so much what you are as what you think you are," she said finally, trying to sort it all out. "I mean, if you think you're something, then it's almost as if you were something." "It works the other way, too," said Penny. "Look at Snavely. He knows he's a garter snake, but these people didn't know that. As far as they were concerned, he was a monster." "Well, then, that made him a monster, I guess, if enough people thought it." "It did for the time being," said Penny, "but we're going to change that." By this time, they were back among the green people, all of them pressed in a dense green mass against the rock wall, their big eyes staring from their heads in terror. Penny climbed up onto a big rock by the cavern door. "Now," she said, "all of you, listen to me. The snake people are gone. They won't come back." A shudder of relief passed through the crowd. "As far as that goes," Penny went on, "there never were any snake people. Everybody began talking at once. "There was one little garter snake," cried Penny, and she reached down and plucked the green baby out of Patsy's arms. "And here he is," she cried. The baby waved Snavely back and forth. "Snavely loves this," Patsy whispered to Peter. "It's a big moment for him. He thinks he's the mad monster." "This is the baby that was supposed to have been eaten by a monster," said Penny. "And this," holding up Snavely, "this is the terrible Glog."